The cargo ship Dawnrunner moved slowly through the darkness of space. Its captain, Megan Torres, stood at the helm and watched the stars pass by the window. She was only 28 years old, but she had already spent 6 years flying supply routes to the outer colonies. This trip was supposed to be simple. Pick up food and medicine from the station at Jupiter, deliver it to the colony on Kepler 442b, and return home to Earth in time for her mother's birthday. The year was 2187, and humanity had finally reached the stars. After centuries of dreaming, they had built ships that could travel faster than light. They had found a world that could support human life, and they had named it New Haven. 12,000 colonists now called that distant planet home. They were farmers and teachers, doctors and engineers. They had left Earth to build something new, something peaceful. Megan loved these people. She had made the supply run to New Haven 14 times, and she knew many of the colonists by name. The children would gather at the landing pad whenever her ship arrived. Eager to see what treats she had brought from Earth, she always made sure to pack extra chocolate bars and picture books. The Dawnrunner carried enough supplies to feed the colony for 3 months. The harvest on New Haven had failed due to an unexpected frost, and the colonists were hungry. Megan had pushed her ship to its limits to reach them as quickly as possible. She was thinking about the children's faces when her communications officer, a young man named Pete Garcia, called out from his station. "Captain, we have contacts on the long-range scanner. 3 ships coming in fast." Megan felt her stomach tighten. Humanity was not alone in the universe. They had learned this truth 5 years ago when they encountered the Vexari, a species of tall, reptilian creatures who had ruled this part of the galaxy for 3,000 years. The Vexari viewed humans the way humans might view insects. They were curious at first, then annoyed, and now openly hostile. "Can we outrun them?" Megan asked. Pete shook his head. "They're too fast. They'll intercept us in 12 minutes. Megan looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew. There were only 8 of them, and none were soldiers. The Dawnrunner carried no weapons. It was just a cargo ship, built for hauling supplies, not for fighting. "Open a channel," she said. "Maybe we can talk our way out of this." The view screen flickered to life, and Megan found herself staring at a Vexari commander. He was tall and covered in dark green scales. His eyes were yellow with black slits for pupils, and when he spoke, his voice was cold and harsh. "Human vessel, this is High Executor Wrath of the Vexari Empire. You have entered restricted space. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded." Megan kept her voice calm. "High Executor, my ship is carrying food and medicine for a civilian colony. We mean no harm. Please allow us to continue on our way." Zrath made a sound that might have been laughter. "Your colonies exist only because we allow them to exist. Your cargo now belongs to the Empire. Resist, and you will be destroyed." Megan thought about the hungry children on New Haven. She thought about the sick people waiting for medicine. She thought about everything she had worked for, everything she believed in. "I cannot do that," she said quietly. "These supplies are meant for people who need them. I will not hand them over to you." Zrad's eyes narrowed. "Then you have chosen death, human." The transmission ended. Moments later, the Vexari ships surrounded the Dawnrunner. Megan ordered her crew to the escape pods, but before anyone could move, the enemy soldiers were already cutting through the hull. They moved fast, these Vexari. Their bodies were strong, and their reflexes were quick. Megan grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall. It was the only thing she could find that might serve as a weapon. When the first Vexari soldier burst onto her bridge, she swung it at his head with all her strength. The blow staggered him, but it did not bring him down. He grabbed her by the throat and lifted her off the ground as easily as a human might lift a child. High Executor's Wrath walked onto the bridge. He looked at Megan struggling in the soldier's grip, and he smiled. "You are brave for such a small creature," he said. "But bravery is worthless without strength. Your species is weak. You do not belong among the stars." Megan could not speak. She could barely breathe. But she looked into Zrath's eyes with pure defiance, refusing to show fear even as her vision began to fade. Zrath nodded to his soldier. "Kill her. Make sure the other humans see it. Let this serve as a lesson to all who would defy the Empire." What happened next was broadcast across human space. Every colony, every ship, every person with access to a communication screen saw Megan Torres die. They saw her fight until her last breath. They saw the Vexery soldiers laugh over her body. They heard Zrath's mocking words about human weakness. On New Haven, Commander Danny Cole stood in the control room and watched the transmission in silence. He was 52 years old, a veteran of the early space exploration missions, a man who had seen more than his share of hardship. But nothing had prepared him for this. Dr. Lisa Warren, the colony's chief medical officer, stood beside him. Tears ran down her face, but her hands were steady. Kyle Bennett, the head of security, gripped the edge of a console so hard that his knuckles turned white. The transmission ended. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Commander Cole turned to face his people. His voice was low and hard, filled with a cold fury that none of them had ever heard before. "They think we are weak," he said. "They think they can kill our people and face no consequences. They are wrong." He looked at Kyle. "Begin training every able-bodied colonist for combat. We do not have weapons, so we will make them. We do not have soldiers, so we will become them." He looked at Lisa. "Prepare the medical bay for casualties. There will be many before this is over." Finally, he looked at the dark screen where Megan's face had been moments before. "They have no idea what they have started," he whispered. "But they will learn. By God, they will learn." On the Vexery command ship, High Executor's Wrath felt satisfied with the day's work. He had taught the humans their place. He expected them to cower, to beg for mercy, to accept their role as an inferior species. He could not have been more wrong. He had just made the worst mistake in the history of his empire. He had killed a human and shown no remorse. And now, across the vast darkness of space, humanity was waking up. Not with fear, but with rage. Not with despair, but with determination. The fire had been lit, and it would not be extinguished until the Vexery understood the true cost of their arrogance. The Vexery fleet arrived at Kepler 442b on a cold morning. Commander Cole stood on the observation deck and watched the enemy ships fill the sky like a swarm of metal insects. There were more than 200 of them, each one bristling with weapons that could level a city in minutes. High Executor Zrath commanded the invasion from his flagship. He had brought 20,000 soldiers, more than enough to crush the small human colony. He expected the battle to last a few hours at most. The primitives would see the size of his army and surrender. If they did not, his troops would simply slaughter them all. The first wave of landing ships descended toward the capital city. Kyle Bennett watched them come through his binoculars. His heart pounded in his chest, but his hands were steady on his weapon. Beside him stood 300 volunteers, farmers and mechanics and shopkeepers who had trained for weeks to become fighters. They were hidden in the ruins of buildings near the main landing zone, waiting for the enemy to arrive. The Vexery soldiers poured out of their ships with confidence. They wore heavy armor and carried energy rifles that could burn through steel. They moved in tight formations, exactly as they had been trained. They had conquered dozens of worlds using these same tactics. Victory was certain. Kyle raised his hand and gave the signal. The colonists attacked from every direction at once. Crossbow bolts flew through the air and found gaps in the vestry armor. Homemade bombs exploded beneath enemy feet. Colonists armed with sharpened metal poles charged at the invaders with screams of fury that echoed across the ruined streets. The Vexri were caught completely off guard. They had expected frightened farmers hiding in their homes, not warriors fighting with wild desperation. The battle lasted 18 hours. When the sun finally rose the next morning, 2,000 Vexri soldiers lay dead in the streets. The colonists had lost 112 of their own, including a schoolteacher named Amy Grant, who had killed 7 Vexri with a mining pick before she fell. Her students would remember her sacrifice for the rest of their lives. High Executor's Wrath received the news with disbelief. How was this possible? How could primitive creatures armed with farming tools defeat trained soldiers equipped with advanced technology? He ordered a second wave of troops to land immediately. The second battle was even more brutal than the first. The Vexri adapted their tactics, but so did the humans. The colonists used the tunnel network to appear behind enemy lines, strike quickly, and vanish before the Vexri could respond. They set traps everywhere, turning every building and every street corner into a death zone for the invaders. Commander Cole coordinated the defense from an underground bunker. He had not slept in 3 days, but his mind remained sharp. He moved his people like pieces on a chessboard, always staying one step ahead of the enemy. When the Vexri concentrated their forces in one area, he attacked them from another. When they tried to surround a group of colonists, he opened escape routes through the tunnels. Dr. Lisa Warren worked in a makeshift hospital deep beneath the surface. Wounded fighters arrived every hour, carried on stretchers made from doors and sheets. Lisa operated by candlelight when the power failed, using kitchen knives when her surgical tools ran out. She saved lives that any Vexri doctor would have given up on. She refused to let anyone die while she still had strength to work. After 2 weeks of fighting, High Executor's Wrath made a decision that would haunt him forever. He ordered his ships to begin orbital bombardment of civilian areas. If the humans would not surrender, he would burn their homes and kill their families. Surely that would break their spirit. The bombs fell from the sky like rain. Entire neighborhoods vanished in flames. The colony's central hospital was destroyed, along with the school and the community center where colonists had gathered for celebrations just months before. Hundreds died in the initial attack, including many children who had been sheltering in what they thought were safe locations. Wrath waited for the humans to surrender. He was certain that no species would continue fighting after watching their young ones die. He was wrong. The survivors dug deeper. They expanded the tunnel network. They salvaged materials from the rubble and built new shelters underground. The colonists did not cry or despair. They grew angrier. Their grief transformed into a burning hatred that made them fight even harder. Kyle Bennett lost his wife in the bombardment. She had been helping evacuate children from a school when a Vexri bomb struck the building. For one long night, Kyle sat alone in the darkness and wept. Then he stood up, picked up his weapon, and returned to the fight. He would mourn later. Right now, there was work to be done. The siege continued for 3 months. The Vexri threw wave after wave of soldiers at the colony. The humans killed them by the thousands. The ground was stained with blood, both red and green. The air smelled of smoke and death. Food ran short. The colonists ate whatever they could find. They caught rats that lived in the tunnels. They boiled leather boots to make soup. They grew thin and weak, but they did not give up. They shared every scrap of food equally, making sure that the children ate first. Ammunition ran out. The colonists fought with knives and clubs and bare hands. Old women threw rocks at Vexri soldiers. Young boys lured enemies into traps and triggered explosives. Everyone contributed. Everyone fought. Everyone bled out. By the end of the third month, the colony had lost more than half its population. 6,000 people were dead. The survivors lived like ghosts in the underground tunnels, pale and hungry and exhausted beyond measure. But they had not surrendered. They had not broken. And they had killed 40,000 Vexury soldiers. High Executor's wrath could not understand it. He had conquered species that numbered in the billions. He had broken empires that had stood for centuries. But he could not break 12,000 humans who refused to accept defeat. Commander, Cole sent one final message to Earth. His voice was hoarse and tired, but his words were clear. We are still here. We are still fighting. Send help if you can. If you cannot, remember us. Remember that we did not kneel. Remember that we made them pay for every inch of ground. Remember that humans do not surrender. On Earth, Admiral Patterson received the message. He turned to his officers and smiled grimly. Tell the fleet to prepare for departure. New Haven has held the line. Now it is time for us to finish what the Vexury started. The cavalry was coming, and the enemy would soon learn the true meaning of human vengeance. The news of Megan Torres's death spread across human space faster than any ship could travel. Within hours, every man, woman, and child who lived among the stars knew her name. They had seen the video. They had watched her die. And something changed inside them, something deep and ancient that had slept for generations. On Earth, the leaders of the United Human Coalition gathered in the Great Chamber in Geneva. Presidents and prime ministers, generals and admirals, scientists and diplomats sat in silence as Admiral Greg Patterson stood before them. He was 60 years old, with gray hair and a face lined by decades of service. His hands trembled slightly as he activated the holographic display. You have all seen the transmission, he said. Captain Megan Torres was killed while defending a cargo of food and medicine meant for innocent civilians. The Vexury did not just kill her. They mocked her. They laughed at her. They called humanity weak. The chamber remained silent. Patterson continued. Our intelligence suggests that the Vexury Empire commands over 6,000 warships. We have 47. They have conquered 100 worlds. We have settled 3. By every measure that matters to them, we are nothing. We are insects beneath their feet. He paused and looked around the room. But they have made a terrible mistake. They have forgotten what humans are capable of when we are pushed too far. They do not know our history. They have never heard of Thermopylae, where 300 soldiers held back an army of thousands. They have never studied Stalingrad, where ordinary people fought house to house in the ruins of their own city rather than surrender. They do not understand that we are a species that has survived ice ages and plagues and world wars and our own worst impulses. Patterson's voice grew stronger. The Vexury see our small numbers and assume we will break. They are wrong. Today, I am asking this council to authorize the mobilization of every resource we have. Every shipyard, every factory, every scientist and engineer. We will build a fleet. We will train an army. And we will show the Vexury what happens when you awaken the fury of humanity. The vote was unanimous. For the first time in human history, the entire species united behind a single purpose. Far away on New Haven, Commander Danny Cole had already begun his own preparations. The colony had never been designed for war. It was a place for growing crops and raising families, for building a new civilization among the stars. But the colonists understood that their peaceful life was over. The Vexury would return, and when they did, they would show no mercy. Kyle Bennett worked 18 hours a day training volunteers. Farmers who had never held anything more dangerous than a hoe learned how to fight with knives and clubs. Engineers who had spent their lives building machines now built weapons from mining equipment and scrap metal. They had no rifles, so they made crossbows. They had no grenades, so they made bombs from fertilizer and fuel. Dr. Lisa Warren transformed the colony's small hospital into a field surgery unit. She taught ordinary people how to stop bleeding, how to treat burns, how to save lives when there was no time and no proper equipment. Her hands never shook, even when she was exhausted. She had made a promise to herself that she would not let anyone die from wounds that could be healed. The colonists built tunnels beneath the surface. They dug them by hand when the machines broke down. They reinforced them with metal beams salvaged from buildings that were no longer needed. These tunnels connected every important location in the colony, creating a network of hidden passages that would allow them to move without being seen. Children as young as 12 volunteered to serve as messengers and scouts. Their parents worried, but they understood that everyone had to contribute. The elderly maintained the communication systems, making sure that every part of the colony could stay in contact with every other part. No one was too old or too young to help. Meanwhile, the Vexry Empire watched from afar with amusement. Their spies reported on human activities, and the military commanders laughed at what they heard. The primitives were digging holes in the ground like frightened animals. They were making weapons from farm tools. Did they really think such pathetic preparations would stop the might of the Empire? High Executor's wrath sent a message to the human colonies. His face appeared on every screen, his yellow eyes cold and cruel. "Humans," he said, "you have one chance to avoid destruction. Surrender all your colonies to the Vexry Empire. Disband your military forces. Accept your place as servants of a superior species. If you refuse, we will burn your worlds to ash and scatter your bones across the void." Commander Cole received the message in his command center. His officers gathered around him, waiting to see how he would respond. Some of them were afraid. The Vexry fleet was vast and powerful. How could a handful of colonists hope to stand against such might? Cole thought about Megan Torres. He thought about her smile, her courage, her refusal to surrender even when there was no hope. He thought about all the humans throughout history who had faced impossible odds and chosen to fight anyway. He opened a channel to transmit his reply. His voice was calm and steady. "This is Commander Danny Cole of the New Haven colony. I have received your demands, High Executor's wrath. Here is my answer." He paused for a moment, letting the silence stretch across the stars. "Come and take them." The transmission ended. Cole turned to his people and saw the fear in their eyes transform into something else. Pride, determination, defiance. "They think they know what we are," Cole said. "They think we are soft because we came here seeking peace. They think we are weak because we do not enjoy violence. But they are about to learn the truth. When humans fight for something we believe in, when we fight for each other, there is no force in the universe that can stop us." On Earth, the shipyards roared to life. Workers who had never built warships before studied the designs and began assembling hulls and engines and weapons. Scientists who had spent their careers in peaceful research now focused on finding ways to defeat Vexry technology. A young engineer named Ryan Cooper spent every waking hour studying captured fragments of Vexry shielding, searching for a weakness. Retired soldiers returned to active duty. Men and women in their 60s and 70s put on uniforms again, ready to train the next generation of fighters. Pilots who had flown cargo ships and passenger transports volunteered for combat assignments. And in a small apartment on Earth, a young woman named Samantha Torres watched the news reports with tears in her eyes. Megan had been her older sister, her hero, her best friend. Now Megan was gone, killed by aliens who thought humans were nothing. Samantha walked to the recruitment office and signed up for pilot training. She was 24 years old, and she had never wanted to be a soldier. But that did not matter anymore. She was going to learn how to fly a fighter ship. She was going to reach New Haven, and she was going to make the Vexery pay for what they had done. The storm was gathering, and the Vexery had no idea what was coming. While New Haven burned, Earth had not been idle. Every shipyard on the planet and in orbit worked around the clock. Workers slept in shifts of 4 hours, ate their meals at their stations, and pushed their bodies beyond all reasonable limits. They were not just building ships. They were building hope. Admiral Greg Patterson oversaw the construction from his command center. He watched the numbers climb day by day. 50 ships, 100, 200, 300. Every vessel that could be fitted with weapons was pressed into service. Cargo haulers became troop transports. Mining ships became gun platforms. Even luxury yachts were stripped down and rebuilt for war. Retired veterans flooded the recruitment centers. Men and women who had not worn uniforms in decades volunteered for active duty. They trained the younger generation, passing on skills that had been learned in conflicts long forgotten. Grandparents taught their grandchildren how to fight. In a research laboratory in Houston, a young engineer named Ryan Cooper made a discovery that would change everything. He had been studying fragments of Vexery shielding for months, running test after test, failing again and again. But he refused to give up. Megan Torres had been his friend. They had attended the academy together. He owed it to her memory to find a way to hurt the creatures who had killed her. On the 93rd day of the siege of New Haven, Ryan found it. A frequency. A specific pattern of energy that could pass through Vexery shields as if they did not exist. He ran the calculations 3 times to make sure he was not mistaken. Then he ran to Admiral Patterson's office and showed him the results. Patterson stared at the data for a long moment. Then he smiled, a cold and terrible smile that would have frightened anyone who saw it. "Get this to every ship in the fleet," he said. "We leave tomorrow." The human fleet departed Earth on a clear morning. 312 warships, carrying over 100,000 soldiers and crew members. It was the largest military force humanity had ever assembled. It was still outnumbered 5-1 by the Vexery Armada, but the humans did not care about the odds. Samantha Torres sat in the cockpit of her fighter, watching Earth grow smaller in her rear viewport. She had completed her training in half the usual time, driven by a fury that her instructors had never seen before. She was not the best pilot in the fleet, but she was the most determined. She would reach New Haven or die trying. The journey took 11 days. The crews used this time to prepare themselves mentally for what was coming. Chaplains held services for those who wanted them. Soldiers wrote letters to their families, knowing they might never have another chance. Some people cried. Some people laughed. Some people sat in silence, thinking about everything they might lose. Admiral Patterson addressed the entire fleet on the final night before arrival. "Tomorrow, we fight," he said. "Many of us will not survive. I will not lie to you about that. The Vexery are powerful, and they are cruel, and they have no mercy. But they have made one mistake that will cost them everything. They thought they could frighten us into submission by killing one of our own. They were wrong." He paused, letting his words sink in. "We do not fight because we hate the Vexery. We fight because we love each other. We fight for the colonists on New Haven who have held the line for 3 months against impossible odds. We fight for Megan Torres, who died rather than abandon innocent people. We fight for every human who has ever looked at the stars and dreamed of reaching them." His voice grew stronger. "Tomorrow, we show the galaxy what humanity is made of. Tomorrow, we make them pay. Tomorrow, we bring our people home." The fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kepler system. Before them waited the Vexery Armada, over 1,500 warships arranged in a defensive formation around the planet. High Executor's Wrath watched the human fleet arrive and laughed. "Look at them," he said to his officers. They've brought 300 ships to fight 1,500. The primitives cannot even count. He opened a communication channel to the human flagship. Admiral Patterson, I presume. You have brought your little fleet a long way to watch it die. Surrender now, and I may allow some of your people to live as slaves. Patterson appeared on the view screen. He was calm, almost relaxed. High Executor's Wrath, he said. Tell me, have you ever studied human history? Have you ever heard of the Berserker Rage? Wrath's eyes narrowed. I do not care about your primitive superstitions. You should. It is a state that humans enter when we have nothing left to lose. When our loved ones are threatened. When our homes are burning. When we are pushed beyond all limits. In that state, we feel no fear. We feel no pain. We feel only the absolute need to destroy our enemies, no matter the cost. Patterson leaned forward, his eyes cold as ice. Every single person in this fleet is in that state right now. We are not here to negotiate. We are not here to surrender. We are here to kill you all. He cut the transmission and gave the order to attack. What followed was chaos, unlike anything the Vexery had ever experienced. Human ships charged directly at the enemy formation, ignoring all defensive protocols. Pilots flew suicide runs into Vexery carriers, crashing their vessels into enemy hulls when their weapons ran empty. Damaged ships that should have retreated instead accelerated forward, ramming anything in their path. The Vexery shields failed one after another as Ryan Cooper's frequency spread through the fleet. Enemy warships that had seemed invincible suddenly exploded under human fire. The Vexery commanders screamed orders at their crews, but nothing could stop the onslaught. Samantha Torres flew through the heart of the battle, her fighter weaving between explosions and debris. She shot down 11 Vexery craft before her weapons overheated. Then she saw a Vexery bomber heading toward a human hospital ship filled with wounded soldiers. Without hesitation, she rammed her fighter into the bomber, destroying both vessels in a ball of fire. But Samantha did not die. Her ejection system launched her into space moments before impact. A rescue shuttle picked her up 20 minutes later. She would live to fight another day. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, more than 900 Vexery warships had been destroyed. The survivors fled the system in panic, abandoning their ground forces on New Haven. Admiral Patterson looked at the debris field that had once been an armada and felt no joy. Too many good people had died today. But the colonists were safe. The siege was broken. And the Vexery would never again underestimate humanity. Send a message to New Haven, he said quietly. Tell them the cavalry has arrived. The first human shuttle landed on New Haven 3 hours after the space battle ended. Admiral Patterson himself was aboard, along with medical teams and supplies that the colonists desperately needed. When the shuttle doors opened, he stepped out into a world of ruins and silence. Commander Danny Cole stood waiting at the landing pad. He had aged 20 years in 3 months. His hair had turned gray, his face was gaunt, and his eyes carried the weight of everyone he had lost. But he stood straight and tall, and when he saw Patterson, he saluted. Patterson returned the salute, and then did something unexpected. He embraced Cole like a brother. You held the line, Patterson said quietly. Against everything they threw at you, you held the line. Cole's voice was hoarse. We lost so many. More than half the colony is gone. But the other half survived. Because of you. Because of everyone who refused to surrender. The colonists emerged from their tunnels like ghosts rising from graves. They were thin and pale, covered in dirt and dried blood, wearing clothes that had not been washed in months. But they were alive. They had survived the worst that the Vexery could throw at them, and they were still standing. Dr. Lisa Warren appeared at the entrance to the underground hospital. She had not slept in 4 days, and she could barely stand. But when she saw the medical teams unloading supplies from the shuttle, She smiled for the first time in weeks. Help had finally arrived. On the surface of the planet, the remaining Vekari ground forces found themselves trapped. Their fleet had fled, leaving them behind. They had no way to escape and no hope of reinforcement. Most of them surrendered within hours. A few tried to fight, but they were quickly overwhelmed by colonists who had learned to kill Vekari soldiers with their bare hands. High Executor Zrath was captured when a team of human marines boarded his damaged flagship. They found him hiding in his private quarters, surrounded by luxury items he had looted from conquered worlds. When they dragged him out, he screamed that they could not treat him this way. He was a High Executor of the Vekari Empire. He demanded to be treated with respect. The Marines brought him to New Haven in chains. They marched him through the ruined streets, past the mass graves where human dead had been buried, past the collapsed buildings where families had died together. The surviving colonists lined the route and watched in silence. No one threw anything. No one shouted. Their silence was more terrible than any mob. Zrath was brought before Commander Cole in what remained of the colony's central square. The ground was scarred by bomb craters, and the walls of nearby buildings were pockmarked with weapons fire. Cole stood waiting, his arms crossed over his chest. High Executor's wrath, Cole said. Do you remember the message I sent you 3 months ago? When you demanded our surrender. Zrath said nothing. His yellow eyes darted around, looking for any chance of escape. There was none. I told you to come and take them, Cole continued. You came. You brought your fleet and your army and your weapons. You burned our homes and killed our children. You thought you would break us. He stepped closer to Zrath, close enough to see his own reflection in those alien eyes. How did that work out for you? Zrath finally found his voice. How is this possible? We are superior to you in every way. Our technology, our numbers, our civilization has ruled the stars for 3,000 years. How could primitives from one small planet defeat us? Cole reached into his pocket and pulled out a photograph. It showed a young woman with dark hair and a bright smile. Megan Torres, on her graduation day from the Space Academy. You killed her, Cole said. You killed her because she would not abandon innocent people. You laughed over her body and called us weak. But you did not understand what you were doing. He held the photograph where Zrath could see it clearly. We do not fight for territory. We do not fight for resources. We do not fight for glory or power or any of the things your empire values. We fight for each other. We fight for the people we love. We fight because giving up is not something we know how to do. Cole put the photograph back in his pocket. You studied our ships and our weapons and decided we were no threat. But you never studied our history. You never learned about all the times we faced impossible odds and refused to surrender. You never understood that humans are at their most dangerous when they have something worth dying for. Zrath was taken away to face justice. The Vekari Empire, shocked by the destruction of their fleet and the capture of one of their highest officers, sued for peace. The treaty negotiations lasted 6 months. When they were finished, human space had been recognized as inviolable. No Vekari ship would ever again enter human territory without permission. Other alien species watched these events with great interest. They had assumed, like the Vekari, that humans were too young and too weak to matter in galactic affairs. Now, they quietly adjusted their assessments. The newcomers from Earth had proven themselves. They were not to be trifled with. 1 year after the siege ended, the colonists of New Haven gathered at a memorial built from the wreckage of Vekari warships. The monument stood in the center of the rebuilt capital city, a tower of twisted metal and broken weapons reaching toward the sky. At its base, a wall of polished stone bore the names of everyone who had died in the conflict. Samantha Torres was there. She had recovered from her injuries and returned to active duty. but she had requested leave to attend this ceremony. She walked slowly along the wall until she found her sister's name carved into the stone. Megan Torres, the first human to die in the war. The spark that had ignited an inferno. Samantha placed a bouquet of flowers at the base of the wall. She did not cry. She had done her crying. Now she simply stood in silence, remembering the sister who had taught her to ride a bicycle, who had helped her with homework, who had encouraged her to reach for the stars. Commander Cole approached the podium and addressed the crowd. His voice was stronger now, though sadness still lingered in his eyes. "We gather here today to remember," he said. "To remember those who gave everything so that we might live. To remember their courage, their sacrifice, their unbreakable spirit. They did not die in vain. Because of them, we stand here free. Because of them, humanity has earned its place among the stars." He paused and looked up at the sky, where human ships now patrolled without fear. The Vexari thought they knew what we were. They learned the truth the hard way. And now the entire galaxy knows as well. Humanity is young, but we are not weak. We are not afraid. And we will never, ever surrender. The memorial bore a simple inscription, taken from an ancient human poem. 4 words that captured everything the colonists had endured and everything they had proven. Do not go gentle. The crowd stood in silence for a long moment. Then, one by one, they began to disperse, returning to the work of rebuilding their world. The war was over. The dead were remembered. And humanity looked toward the future, ready to face whatever challenges awaited them among the stars. They had paid a terrible price for their freedom, but they had proven something that no alien species would ever forget. When humans fight for what they believe in, there is no force in the universe that can stop them.